Welcome to Whether or Not and to What Degree podcast. It's from your Fox Carolina First Alert weather team. I'm First Alert Chief Meteorologist Kendra Kent alongside First Alert Meteorologist Chrissy Kohler. So talking about a subject that I know you're very familiar with this go round.
Yes, hurricane season. It's upon us, Kendra. We're here again.
And you've worked on the coast. Obviously, you know, we're impacted by hurricanes here, but there is a certain level of, on edge, on the, really monitoring these systems really from the get-go all the way through those 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I did work at the coast for 8 years in Charleston, 2 years in Myrtle Beach, so very familiar with how that impacts the Carolinas, especially down at the coast. So this has been a little bit of a shift for me to learn how it impacts you guys up here, but certainly still getting those impacts felt, as you just said.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people here either vacation at the coast every single year or have family down there. So tropics always a really important topic around here, and we always stay on top of these systems as they get going. And we're going to start by talking a little bit about what to expect this season, because as we go into the summer, we're heading into an El Nino pattern, which might not mean much to you at home, but essentially it's a shift in the temperatures in the Pacific, which ends up kind of connecting to our weather, creating stronger upper level winds, and it's actually a less favorable environment for hurricanes, which we like.
Yeah, we definitely like to hear that, especially because the last 3 seasons have been La Nina years, including that record-setting one back in 2020 where we had 30 named storms. 30.
That's so crazy. I forgot that was 2022. Just to add on to everything else going on in that year.
Right.
We had a lot of hurricanes.
Crazy. So it's nice to see a little bit of a step back, but as we always used to say down at the coast, and it holds true up here. It only takes one storm to really mess up your day, to mess up your week, to mess up your month.
And for you to look at it as a significant hurricane season, even if it was just one out of a less than average number.
So we do talk about these numbers because it does show the kind of odds that we're looking at here. But as you just said, Kendra, it looks like we're going to see a pretty average season this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised with El Nino being in place, but I think that they also factor in the fact that a lot of the sea surface temperatures are warmer right now. The 12 to 17 range, I like to see that we're on the slightly lower end of that, not really, kind of right in the middle. And then 5 to 9 hurricanes, that's more normal. But that's the forecast anyway. And then we're looking at 7 being what they're expecting. So again, right in the middle there. And then 3 major hurricanes as in the 1 to 4 range. That's a little actually on the slightly higher end. But again, that has seemed to be the trend. Especially when you get into the heart of the season, those hurricanes can really blow up if they can get into the right environment. And that's going to be the big question this year. Will we keep the upper level winds active enough where we just can't get that good development right by the U.S.? Yeah. Or will we end up with a lull in those winds and then we get a bunch of storms all at once? So.
Well, and it's been interesting because we already had our first tropical storm of the year. The National Hurricane Center went back.
I thought that was interesting. Way back.
Yeah, went back to January.
Yes.
And they were like, hey, this thing that we didn't, at the time, they weren't even issuing alerts or keeping an eye on necessarily, but they went back and looked at the data and said, oh yeah, that was a tropical storm that blew off the coast about mid-January, came off the coast of New England, went out into the Atlantic subtropical system, brought some snow to parts of New England, and then they're like, okay, we'll call that the first one of the season.
Well, so it has technically started. We'll be moving on to the B name here shortly. But as we go into the season, there actually have been some changes, subtle changes that have been made through National Hurricane Center. One really great fact to know, though, is that they're doing a heck of a job there. We're realizing more and more that cone of uncertainty that you see on our broadcasts is a fine-tuned, very good forecast for these storms, and they're really realizing that it's better than a lot of the model data that comes in, correct?
Yeah, which is such I think a comforting thing for us.
It is.
We're like, yes, this is a good forecast. So yeah, the National Hurricane Center, of course, looks back at everything that they do and really assesses. They do a really good job of assessing their performance and giving themselves their performance reviews. So they've decided to expand the tropical outlook outlooks from 5 to 7 days. So now we get an extra 2 days of systems. Now, you and I were just talking about this. This isn't the cone that we're talking about, but this is the outlooks of within the next 7 days now, we think that this could potentially develop. And it just gives them a chance to kind of highlight some systems a little earlier, upgrade them possibly, and then that larger potential of development area, you know, those little blobs that we see out in the Atlantic of, hey, that's got a 20% chance on it. Those areas are going to get a little bigger, I think.
Yeah, and that's some of that stuff is, you know, maybe mostly meteorologists are looking at. The average person may not go there that much, but this really does, it accomplishes their goal of giving more lead time, more awareness of, hey, we're watching this area, so that anyone who could potentially be impacted by it can at least start that, you know, stage 1 of preparedness, and then, you know, how all of it goes when it comes. Then I guess stage 5 would be get the heck out of there, but you know, you can at least be on guard and have all the information that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you know, you have been here in the Carolinas for a very long time. I've been here obviously not as long as you have, but long enough that we've seen, especially this time of year, when we talk about those early season systems, a lot of times it's a low pressure system that hits us with the rain, goes off the coast, and then reforms and comes right back in.
Which just seems unfair, but it happens.
Yeah, so you get these homegrown systems, and so you don't get a lot of lead time with them anyways. So any extra time, even just a couple extra days, is always a nice little thing to have in there.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that, you know, we're looking at the forecast being as accurate at day 7 as it is day 5, which I probably have to take that with a grain of salt because day 5's not going to be super pinpoint accurate.
Right.
It isn't with any forecast.
Right.
But they're realizing that they can get a good feel for things in that 2 to 3 day window still. And again, that can mean all the difference when it comes to planning a vacation.
Absolutely.
Maybe you're thinking about going to Bermuda, or you're thinking about heading to the islands and or just the North Carolina coast. Either way, and you know, you see that, okay, there's an area of concern in this 7 days. You can at least be more focused on guard about whether.
Yeah, you bring up a
plans
good
need to
point. You could at least maybe shift your flight plans,
Correct,
try to push it back a little bit if you're traveling. All of those things are good things to know.
Yeah. So it's, you know, something that we hope to, as we go through hurricane season, that we can, you know, send along these messages so that you're prepared, because we're not going to have to evacuate here, but we could have evacuees come here, and we also could have trees go down from wind. We could have tornado outbreaks, which we've seen with many tropical systems. That's a big one. And I know you'll be highlighting too on air, you know, some of the impacts we get from those tropical systems, which can be big. And I think, you know, that's one reason that we really become hyper-focused when those storms have us anywhere near that cone.
Well, and you can speak to the flooding. Just a couple of years ago, you guys had a pretty impactful storm up here, right?
That's right. Yeah, Fred came up, and I think there were 30 tornado warnings with it.
Wow.
Luckily, it didn't end up producing tons of tornadoes. That really wasn't the big story.
Sure.
It was up in the mountains where all that rain fell.
Yeah.
And it was one of those situations where, you know, it rained a good bit leading up to Fred's arrival, and then the core of the system dumped tons of rain. So it was a once in a century kind of flood for areas in Haywood County. So yeah, it was really tough. We were up covering that, and we just hope that, you know, nothing like that. Maybe it'd be another century or at least a decade before we get that kind of flooding. But again, we're going to be on top of it for you. We'll be keeping you posted through hurricane season. And of course, if you have any questions for us or want to reach out, you can always email us directly, kendra.ken@foxcarolina.com and chrissy.kohler@foxcarolina.com. If you have any ideas for podcasts upcoming or questions about hurricanes, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll be signing off for our podcast, but we'll see you for the next one.